well. It's my understanding that there was an op-ed in the New York Times published just at the close of the year that had the title is pretty provocative. Tell us about that.
You know, Carl, I think we ended this year with a shocking op-ed in the New York Times, but one that is very helpful for conservatives to read, because it lays bare what the left has been doing for decades. It actually outlines their thought patterns. It's called Let's Give Up on the Constitution. It's written by Louis Michael Seidman. He is a constitutional law professor at Georgetown. And he's also the author of a book that's going to come out soon. It's called On Constitutional Disobedience. Let me just summarize this in a nutshell. Essentially, he is telling the political class, the literary class, basically the elites of our country, to go ahead and disobey the Constitution. He says that the Constitution is archaic, and it consists of, quote, unquote, evil provisions. What he's basically saying is this. The way the political class operates now, instead of tackling a problem head-on with the judgments based on contemporary knowledge, the political class often tries to reference what the Founding Fathers might have wanted us to do, which you and I would agree is a healthy way to proceed.
I would think so, yes.
He says instead, no, why do we keep arguing about what these white, dead, propertied slaveholders want us to do? They're irrelevant, and in fact, they're a hindrance to our political process. So he's saying essentially we are trying to make decisions based on what guys that have been dead for 2 centuries want us to do, and guys that were slaveholders and were evil in his view, or had an evil factor to their lives from his perspective. And so what he says is, also if you look throughout the history of our republic, the Constitution has sometimes been disobeyed, and it has not led to social disintegration. You know, for example, even FDR, he disobeyed the Constitution in order to erect the New Deal. That's an example of constitutional disobedience. He lists a lot of this constitutional disobedience, which he thinks is actually, it has helped us to evolve, to progress, instead of leading to social decay. So what he says is, you know what, the Constitution, it's kind of useful because it lays out a system of government, but why are we so enslaved to it? We can unshackle ourselves from it.
Well, you know what's interesting to me, and I want you to have most of the time, but this historical revisionism that the left is continually, of course they own the government schools, so it's easy for them to do it, but this notion that our founding fathers were all a bunch of evil white slave traders is just absolute hogwash. First of all, not all of them were slave owners. Second of all, those that were slave owners, it's because Great Britain had instituted slavery in the colonies. Great Britain had been involved in slavery for 100 years before the United States gained its independence. And these so-called evil white slave traders, some of them who did own slaves, it is a matter of historical fact, several of them released their slaves, plus every one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence signed their names under the words, all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And then we read their letters and we discover that they were trying to end slavery. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, when he first penned the Declaration of Independence, had a huge anti-slavery portion in it. And he was a slaveholder, so to speak. And the reason they didn't do it is because they knew that they wouldn't be able to have the revolution if they insisted on ending slavery in one flail swoop, so they left it to future generations. Am I wrong on that?
Oh, my goodness, Carl, you've hit on so many excellent points. But let me hammer it home very succinctly.
Yeah.
Every civilization in the history of the world has been a slave-owning civilization, including the African people themselves.
Yes, and including American Indians. They enslaved each other.
Right, and it was the Anglo-American ideals and Anglo-American efforts that eventually led to the concept that slaves shouldn't exist.
Right. We fought a war and killed 500,000 of ourselves to stop it.
Right, so it's a completely anachronistic argument.
Yes.
It's applying the standards of the present backwards,
yes,
and saying that those folks were evil when
yes,
it was their brilliance that led us to our current standards.
Yes, and by the way, it was the Democrats in the South who promoted slavery. It was the Democrats in the South who started the KKK. It was the Democrats who started Planned Parenthood and the abortion holocaust. Just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, and you know what is very important here, Carl? One of the themes you and I have discussed over and over again is how, very sadly, in our country, we are beginning to disagree on first principles.
Yeah.
And we don't agree anymore on the first principles of our moral and ethical code. But we have held on, the difference between the left and the right, we've held on tacitly a belief that we've got to uphold the Constitution, right?
Right.
That's got to be a first principle. And now you're seeing that the left, they have been subtly undermining the Constitution for decades, and now they're coming right out and saying, you know what? This is bondage to our principles. It's
right.
Constitutional bondage. That's the word that this author uses.
Right. Well, it is bondage to the principles of the left. To the progressives, it's bondage, yeah. It keeps them from evil from reigning.
Well, you have to understand that they previously agreed. I mean, there was a consensus in this whole society that the Constitution preserved everybody's liberties.
Yes.
We may disagree on how to enact certain legislation, but we agreed that the Constitution was a bedrock of every individual's liberty.
Yes.
This is very dangerous when we start saying that the Constitution is actually archaic and it actually prevents liberty from unfolding.
Right,
this is a very, very dangerous article.
But Grace, historically, we've been infiltrated. We've been invaded. I mean, the Democrat Party of decades and decades ago is not the Democrat Party of today. The Democrat Party of today is progressive. It's socialistic. It's communistic. It has an agenda to undermine and to bring down this nation economically, militarily.
That is absolutely correct, but it has been so starkly revealed now.
Yes.
Like, for example, if you would ask any Democrat serving today whether that we should give up on the Constitution, they would be obliged to say absolutely not. I mean,
Right.
they swear an oath to the Constitution.
Right.
Right, in order to serve us.
Yeah, that's a brilliant
point. Even
point.
the president himself has sworn that oath. So it has remained, a founding principle, a key principle of our government. And now we're seeing that we have seen over and over again how Obama has violated the Constitution, but always claiming that he's not doing so. What's dangerous here is the precedent that, hey, we should violate it. We should be proud of violating it because violating it is the way to preserve freedom.
Right. No, I hear you. No, you're nailing it. Well, so have you got your pulse? Have you got the pulse on any of the reaction to this op-ed piece?
Well, the reaction from people like me,
yeah, well, I know,
conservatives
well,
are going
our
to say,
audience,
we've told you all along that the left is out to destroy the Constitution, even though so many times they have denied that.
Yeah, well,
so basically from the right, they're saying, here it is. Yeah. There's everything we've been saying. It's right on paper.
Yeah.
And the reaction on the left is rather mixed. But, this isn't surprising because if you look at how we've discussed the issues that have risen all the way to the Supreme Court, there's this big discussion between how do you create law? Are you supposed to make law based on this concept of originalism, what the Founding Fathers wanted? Or do you make laws based on the fact that the Constitution is a living, quote-unquote, breathing organism that evolves?
Fluid document, yeah. It's a
fluid document.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so some people on the left are saying, well, this is part of understanding how it's a fluid document. Mm-hmm. He's helping us to grasp that it is a fluid document, that we have violated the provisions of the Constitution, and it hasn't led to anarchy. So in some respects, this piece is being hailed.
Yeah.
But there's such danger here, and that's what I'm really emphasizing.
Yeah.
That when you start to stray away from all of the principles that unite us, eventually you're going to lead to it's going to get to a point where, I hate to say it, but there's going to be violence in this nation.
I know. A lot of people are saying that and feeling that, Dr. Grace. Listen, I won't talk more about that when we come back. We got to take a quick time out.